we'll now invite Hayley. Where's Hayley? There she is, standing right at the back. So Hayley's story is a little bit different to Jo. So Jo was part of that group that she mentioned in 2024. Hayley's in the 2025 group, but I'll let her explain her story.
I'd like to start by saying, from my Strengths Finder, it confirmed that I lead with communication, having 2 of my top 5 strengths actually in communication. Therefore, 5 minutes could be a struggle. I have tried my best. You cut a lot out of it. Okay. Good evening. While I see some familiar faces in the room, let me take a moment to formally introduce myself. My name is Hayley Cox. I am a shareholder and an employee of Simply Super Audits, an ASIC registered FMSF auditor, and I've been asked to share with you why I chose to buy into Simply Super Audits. To understand why, we have to go back to the start. Back in college, I didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to do. I just knew business and finance were the foundation of so many parts of life, so accounting felt like a solid choice. It was during my first job that I realised I wanted to own a business one day. I just didn't know what to do with that business. I joined Michael and the team at MDH Accounting in August 2020. From my first interview, Michael showed me how invested he is in developing his people. He said to me, "We'll be needing an auditor in a few years." At that time, I didn't realise he'd found a key piece in his succession plan and that I was stepping into a career path that I didn't even know existed. As I learnt more about the SMSF audit pathway, I'll admit, I looked into what I would need to do to set up my own compliant audit business. Would have meant taking a huge leap of faith, giving up stability, building a brand from scratch, and stepping into an industry that relies heavily on referrals through relationships and networking, which isn't naturally a strength of mine, ignoring communication. I watched MDH merge into the format that we have today, and I saw people like Jo step up and grow into new roles. So when the idea of a buy-in to Simply Super was first mentioned, I was on board immediately. It offered everything I wanted without the instability that had always held me back from going out on my own. There were a few other reasons that made sense. The income was passive, but I still had the ability to influence the return. I understood the financial side. I was doing the invoicing, the expenses, the payroll. I knew how the business ran. I knew the staff. I knew what kind of team I was choosing to grow with. One of the biggest reasons is that Michael offered it to me. Ownership is a gesture of trust. If he planned to show me the door, he certainly wouldn't have given me the chance to own a part of his business. When we began talking through the shareholder agreement, I realised something important. I wasn't buying control, but I was buying a voice. It meant that I'd be able to contribute to decisions, to the culture we're shaping, and to the long-term direction of the business that I genuinely care about. Even though I'd already been working cradle to grave, Michael's words, in the accounting sense, this opened a whole new layer of learning, and I've enjoyed growing into that side of things. Today, when I meet our trustees or speak with our referring accountants, those interactions feel different. I'm not just representing the firm I work for, I'm representing something I've chosen to help build, and I find myself asking internally questions more often. Are the clients happy? Did I deliver quality? What can I improve next time? For someone early in their career like me, this wasn't an exit strategy or retirement plan. For me, buying in was about the choice in choosing the people I wanted to grow alongside, having certainty in my future, and being a part of something that is both stable and meaningful in an industry I see myself in for the long haul.
As you hopefully would have picked up, there's a variety of reasons why the employee buys in, but I suppose it's all part of that under that growth umbrella. I remember the interview with Hayley I think it was for a reception role. I said, oh, I don't think you're suited for that, but I'm interested in you as a person and what you've done and where you're heading. And she said, well, you know, I'm going to work for myself one day. I said, oh, well, that's fine. And she's just been up front the whole way through. As you described, she's able to hopefully have the best of both worlds for herself. So the next section is a bit more grittier, I suppose, just to look under the hood of how the mechanics of an employer share ownership has worked for ourselves. So, as I said, we're good people, and as Hayley and Joe mentioned, having those hard conversations up front. So the hard conversations, in practical terms, is the shareholders' agreement that documents all of that. And I call it the 3 Ds. It's death, divorce, and disputes. And so when you start on a journey, sometimes in business together, it's all sort of happy and you're sort of you're excited about the business and what it's trying to do. But unfortunately, I have seen I was in partnership myself in the early days, it dissolved. And so I've seen the back end of dissolved partnerships. So I suppose it's a word of encouragement to have those conversations up front. So yeah, it is tacky to talk about what happens if one of us dies, what's the process? Divorce, if we can't get on together, what's it look like? If someone doesn't want to work for their business anymore, have those conversations. And disputes, how we're going to resolve when we just can't move forward on things. So this all gets documented on the journey. I suppose I'll call it the back of the envelope. It's probably no lawyers in the room, so we have like a back of the envelope working document basically that we work up over time, certain headings to work through. And then at the end of the process, when everyone's happy, then we put it through the legalese at that point in time. I've seen too many shareholder agreements, they'll start with the legal stuff up front and they just get bogged down with legal speak and doesn't progress, so you end up with no shareholders or partnership agreement. It doesn't progress. So as I said, an important element, almost pretty much a non-negotiable in my view, is having a shareholders agreement. Meeting rhythms, and that's, I suppose, just some practical stuff. As I said, we still have our team meetings, then we have directors meetings, and to wear the two hats is a bit of a growth area for all of us, where we try to isolate, well, that's really an operational matter, or when does operations come into a director's role? So director's role, if you strip it back under company's law, is to act in the best interest of all shareholders. So, as Joe said, sometimes she's got to filter things and say, oh, what's in the best interest of all the shareholders here, not necessarily her personal interests or interests of her team. So it's challenging, but we set some parameters around that, and they're evolving as well. Like we have monthly directors meetings, and what we've decided is that every second one will be more operational focused, and the one will be more strategy. Andrew is involved with the financial planning side of the business, financial streams. He said, I don't have much to contribute in the operational stuff because he's not involved with the day-to-day, but he's got a lot to contribute in the strategy. So we just mix it up a bit like that. The other point, role and remuneration of the director. You may have heard the term sweat equity, which is essentially where someone gets underpaid their remuneration and gets offered shares in the company. I'm not a believer in that. To me, there's two conversations taking place. So to follow up what Nick's talking about, it's having what's your role in the business and what's the market-based remuneration that's appropriate for the role you're doing, and then still have a performance-based conversation, make sure you're fulfilling whatever role you're employed for. And then the second aspect, as sort of Joe mentioned, it is a financial decision, but as both Hayley and Joe mentioned, it's a financial decision that they can then influence some outcome. Not necessarily from a control perspective, but from a director input or from a shareholder input. And so, to me, they can be intertwined, but they're sort of two separate roles, and constantly we're just trying to navigate our way through that. Hayley touched upon, the control and be up front. We have a schedule of decisions that are unanimous, so there's a bit of control giving up by myself, and we've got a schedule of decisions that it's majority, and I still own majority share. So there's some that we'll have a discussion, but push comes to shove, if we took a vote, that decision would still go whatever I want to do. So not to be bigoted or try and bash my way through it, but to, I suppose, just to represent my shareholder interests, my family interests in a proper way. But there are some of the larger decisions that are unanimous, 100% vote required on things such as, for to buy another business or take on debt or things like that. Some of the bigger stuff is just across the board, 100%. Another element we've built into the shareholders agreement is just to have the business valued annually. Whether we do it or not, another thing, but we build that into the agreement that we'd have an external valuer come in and value the business. What it then does is it puts a stake in the ground for the next 12 months. So 1st of July, we value the business, and then come Christmas time, one of us says we want out of the business or needs to leave for whatever reason, then that's the value that we've got on that shareholding. So we've reduced all that sort of argy-bargy stuff that you often find when the pressure's on, when you're in dispute, someone's ill and can't work anymore, whatever that pressure situation, you try and negotiate an exit price at that point in time. We've taken that off the table. Whether it's right or wrong, it's just very clear and everyone signs up to that. I think Hayley mentioned it's an invitation. It's one I grappled with. The Great Game of Business had a much more formulaic approach, and they had a second tier of shareholders, which we haven't gone down the track at this point in time, but one day we may. It's sort of a live topic. So all the ones at the moment are very active directors' roles. The Great Game of Business, their model has every employee based on the company performance gets a stock or a share, which is a non-voting share. So they don't really have the control, but there's sort of like a bonus structure in that shareholding. And I've had a conversation with other staff members who, of the mindset, I don't really want to be involved with the day-to-day sort of directorship type of role, but I'm interested in having a stake in the outcome of having something to influence. And I'll quote, so Hayley, as you can see, young, ambitious, got a plan. So one of the other employees in the business, Lynn, she was offered as well, and Lynn's probably late 50s, had an idea she might want to retire soon, had an epiphany, she wanted to keep working, and for her, she doesn't see herself as ambitious, but she said, well, I might as well have an investment in a company that I'm involved in than putting my money in a company I'm not involved in and don't have any influence. So it was really an enlightening moment for me that never discount the profile of that employee that you want to have share ownership. The difficult one, I suppose, if you've got employees who may not be the right fit for that being around the table, and that's why I still think it's an invitation rather than a formula. I've seen where people go after X length of service, then you have an opportunity to buy in. I still think it's an invitation. If you don't provide that invitation, then it's another conversation to have. But as hopefully we'll demonstrate, we're not afraid to have those conversations just to clear where people are at. Another point was we had a discussion in the shareholders agreement. What happens if one of us was to leave the business? And so we've been very clear that would require the shares to be sold on a reasonable time frame. What we were conscious about, if we think about it in 10 or 20 years' time, we didn't want, say, someone have an invitation to be a shareholder and look through the share registry and go, who are all these people? I don't know. It's the estate of Michael Harvey. It's the owner's husband still got shareholders. We said, nah, we want people who are actively involved in employment arrangement to still be shareholders. We didn't want to have a whole range of passive investors sitting on our share registry. So that was a very conscious decision. It was a good discussion to have it, and that can change over time, but that was very clear in that space. So hopefully it's provided, I suppose, a bit of some insights into that employee share ownership. I know it's, as I said, quite a topical area for both staff retention. People use it as a succession planning tool. That wasn't my primary motivation. One of the residual benefits, obviously, by diluting my shareholding, it does provide a long-term possibility. But right here, right now, that's not sort of a motivation to exit the business. I'm still enjoying it, but it can be used as a tool for succession planning, where someone says, I want to sell my business to my employees. What I would say is that don't just, our process probably took a couple of years. It's not like the old saying of a shotgun wedding, or you don't want to rush these things. These are important decisions to get right. And one of the biggest things, probably myself, is just to say, well, I've lost my sandpit. Like those of you running your own small business, you love your own sandpit. You make decisions on the fly, not accountable to anyone. So it is a change because you're filtering through what's a decision I need to run past people and what I just get on with it. So we've documented some themes in our shareholders agreement, but there's a lot of goodwill there as well, just to move on things. So these things take time. The last thing I sometimes clients say, I'm going to retire by Christmas and I'm going to sell it to my staff. I said, don't bother. It's too tight a time frame to try and turn that around within a few months. It's whatever time period appropriate, but for us it was, as I said, up to a couple of years to get right. So that's the end of our presentation. Hopefully you've got something out of tonight. Give us some feedback. We want to try and run these 2 or 3 times a year next year. Any topics and stuff like that you want to run. I don't have time for questions, but I'm saying around I'd love to chat to you. I think we've still got the tab going and something to eat. So thanks for coming. Hang around. So, thank you.